The Journey of the Dervish. Chapter 1. The Whisper of the Heart. The village of Kasra was small, a scatter of mud brick houses pressed against the shoulder of a river that never stopped singing. Life here moved in rhythms as old as the stones. The farmers rose with the dawn, their footsteps following the same paths their fathers had walked. Children's laughter drifted from alleyways, women spun yarn under the shade of fig trees, and the men gathered at dusk to share bread and news. Among these villagers was a young man named Azim, the son of a potter. His hands were skilled at shaping clay, his vessels strong and graceful, yet his heart carried a restlessness he could neither explain nor quiet. When he looked at his neighbors, he saw contentment. They worked, they prayed, they raised families, and they died in peace. But when Azim gazed at the horizon, he felt a pull as though something beyond the mountains was calling his name. At night, while others slept, he would sit beside the river. The water's murmurs seemed to weave questions into his thoughts. What lies beyond this life of tasks and duties? What is the secret fire that makes the stars shine? Who whispers inside my chest when all else is silent? One evening, after a long day at the wheel, Azim returned home weary. He lay down but sleep would not come. Instead, he felt a strange heaviness in the air, as though the room itself was waiting. His eyes closed, and in the stillness of half-dream he saw a figure. A man in white robes stood upon a wide desert plain. His face was luminous yet hidden, as if both near and distant. He raised his hand, and in a voice softer than the wind yet sharper than a blade, he said, "Come." Azim awoke with his heart pounding. The walls of his room were the same, the clay pots stacked in their corners unchanged, but he felt as though a door had opened inside him. For days he tried to push the vision aside. He worked, he smiled, he listened to his mother's gentle scolding and his father's practical advice. Yet the dream gnawed at him. The figure's voice lingered like the taste of honey on his tongue. One afternoon, while carrying water from the river, Azim paused on the bank and stared at his reflection. He looked like any other youth of the village, dark hair, strong shoulders, a face neither remarkable nor plain. Yet in his eyes he saw a question burning. He whispered to himself, "Is this all I am meant to be? A potter who shapes clay but never shapes himself?" That night, the dream returned. This time the man in white was farther away, his form wavering in a sea of sand. Again he raised his hand. "Come." Azim fell to his knees, weeping in his sleep, though he did not know why. The next morning, he confided in an old traveler who often passed through the village. The man, with eyes bright as flint and beard white as salt, listened quietly as Azim described the vision. When the youth finished, the traveler smiled. "Many hear the call," he said, "but few answer it. The world is a veil, Azim. Beyond it is a treasure greater than gold, sweeter than bread. But the path to it is not easy. If you follow, you may lose comfort, friends, even yourself. Yet what you find, if you endure, will fill the emptiness in your chest." Azim's breath caught. How do I know if the voice is real? The traveler tapped his chest with a knotted finger. If the whisper comes from here, it is real. The heart does not lie. That night Azim did not wait for the dream. He stood again by the river, and this time he spoke aloud. "Whoever you are, wherever you are, I am ready. I will come." The wind stirred the reeds as though in answer. From that moment, his decision was made. The life of clay and kill would remain behind. He would leave the safety of Kasra, his family's embrace, and the familiar flow of village days. Somewhere beyond the mountains, across the desert, the man in white awaited him. And so the whisper in Azim's heart grew into a flame, small yet unquenchable, guiding him toward a journey he could not yet imagine, one that would strip him bare, test his spirit, and lead him to the threshold of the beloved. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to my channel so you won't miss more eerie and fascinating tales. Chapter 2. The Departure. At dawn, when the first light bled across the river, Azim wrapped a bundle of bread, dates, and a clay water flask. His mother was still asleep, her hand resting gently over her chest as if she were guarding her dreams. His father snored softly, one arm flung across a half-finished jug. Azim hesitated. His throat tightened. To leave without farewell felt like betrayal, yet to stay meant burying the flame in his chest. He placed his hands upon the doorway, whispered a prayer for his parents' protection, and stepped into the cool breath of morning. The village still slept. Only the stray dogs stirred, lifting their heads as he walked past. He felt the weight of every step, as though the earth itself asked him to reconsider. By the time he reached the edge of the fields, tears blurred his sight. He turned once, gazing at the roofs glimmering under dawn, and whispered, "Forgive me. I must go." The road stretched long and harsh. Dust clung to his feet, and the sun grew merciless by midday. His bundle felt lighter with each passing hour until he realized it was not the bundle but his own body that was weakening. Hunger gnawed, thirst scraped his throat, and doubt sank its claws into his mind. What am I doing? Leaving home for a dream? A shadow in the desert? By the third day, Azim's lips were cracked, his feet blistered. He stumbled to a rock for shade and slumped against it, despair pressing his chest. He closed his eyes, thinking perhaps he would die there, unremarkable, another foolish youth swallowed by the road. It was then a voice broke through the haze. "Are you a pilgrim, or a runaway?" Azim opened his eyes. A man stood above him, his face lean and sun-worn, his clothes tattered but his eyes bright with mischief. He carried a staff and a small satchel slung across his chest. Without waiting for an answer, the man crouched, pulled out a hunk of bread, and held it to Azim's mouth. Azim devoured it with trembling hands. The stranger chuckled. "Slowly, boy, or the bread will choke you before hunger ever could." When Azim's strength returned enough to speak, he asked, "Why would you share your food with me?" The man shrugged. "Because tomorrow I may need bread, and you may have some. The road is long, and the desert is not kind." Azim lowered his eyes. "I'm not even sure why I walk this road. I saw someone. In a dream. He called to me." The stranger's smile softened. "Ah, then you are one of those. The road tests the traveler before revealing its destination. Remember that. If it were easy, everyone would walk it." Before Azim could ask his name, the man rose, tapped his staff against the ground, and walked away. His figure shimmered in the heat until it vanished into the horizon. Azim never saw him again, but the words sank deep. The road tests the traveler before revealing its destination. With renewed resolve, Azim rose and pressed forward. Each step no longer felt like wandering but like answering a summons. The ache in his body remained, but it no longer ruled him. His heart carried him farther than his feet ever could. And after many more days of dust and hunger, when the sky burned orange with the setting sun, he saw in the distance a small lodge, half hidden by olive trees. Lamps flickered at its doors, and the faint sound of voices rose like prayer. Azim had arrived at the threshold of his destiny. Chapter 3: The Master's Garden. The lodge was humble, built of stone and timber, its walls weathered by countless seasons. Yet to Azim's weary eyes, it seemed a palace of light. Disciples moved quietly between rooms, their faces serene, their voices low. Some carried water, others swept courtyards, while a few sat in silent circles, lips moving in hushed remembrance. Azim was led to a shaded courtyard where vines climbed wooden trellises and a fountain murmured softly. There, seated upon a carpet, was Sheikh Nuri, the master of the lodge. His beard was silver, his robe plain, his eyes deep as wells. He did not greet Azim with grandeur, but simply motioned for him to sit. Azim bowed, his voice trembling. "Master, I have come in search of the man I saw in a dream. He called me to the desert. I believe you may be the one." Sheikh Nuri studied him for a long moment, then smiled faintly. "You seek much, and yet you know nothing of what you seek. Dreams are doors, but not all doors lead to the beloved. Tell me, Azim, can you sweep a courtyard? Can you carry water? Can you serve without pride?" Azim blinked, unsure if he had heard correctly. "I can work, yes. But I came for wisdom." "Then begin with sweeping," the sheikh replied. "For wisdom is not poured into the heart of the proud. It enters only the vessel that has been emptied and cleaned." And so Azim began his days not with lofty teachings but with menial tasks. He rose at dawn to fetch water, swept leaves from the courtyard, chopped wood, and tended the garden. His back ached, his hands blistered, and often resentment flared. One evening, when he could no longer contain his frustration, he muttered, "I left my family, my home, to serve as a laborer. What lesson lies in dust and dirt? A fellow disciple overheard him and smiled. Brother, the dust you sweep from the courtyard is nothing compared to the dust upon your heart. If you cannot cleanse the one, how will you ever cleanse the other? Azim fell silent, shamed. That night, he sat alone under the stars and whispered a prayer he had never spoken before. Empty me, so that I may be filled with what is real. The garden grew not only flowers but also patience within him. Slowly, Azim's heart softened. The work became less a burden and more a rhythm. And though he still longed for hidden knowledge, he began to sense that perhaps the first step to wisdom was not seeking, but surrender. Chapter 4: Lessons in Silence. The days at the lodge unfolded with a rhythm both strange and soothing. At dawn, Azim rose with the other disciples to perform ablutions and prayers. Then came the work of tending the garden, grinding flour, or mending walls. By evening, they gathered in the great hall, sitting cross-legged in a circle, their lips moving in soft repetition of the divine name. Azim had expected wisdom to come in words, teachings like pearls handed from master to student. But Sheikh Nuri spoke little. Days passed without instruction beyond simple gestures, a nod toward the broom, a finger pointing to the water jars. At first, Azim burned with impatience. I left my home for silence, he whispered to himself. Am I to become nothing but a servant? But slowly, something shifted. In the repetition of tasks, in the murmuring prayers, in the stillness of evenings, he began to feel a quietness seep into him. It was not dramatic, not a vision like the man in white, but it was steady, like water filling a vessel drop by drop. One night, after the prayers, the disciples gathered around Sheikh Nuri. A flute player lifted his instrument, and the first notes drifted like wind through the hall. A drum followed, soft and steady, heartbeat of the earth. The disciples swayed gently, their eyes closed, repeating the divine name in rhythm with the music. Azim watched, uncertain. Then he, too, closed his eyes. The music wound through him, loosening the knots of his thoughts. His lips formed the sacred word, over and over, until it was no longer a sound but a current carrying him. For the first time in his life, Azim felt a stillness deeper than sleep. The weight of his body vanished, the edges of his self blurred, and for a heartbeat he sensed a vast silence, as though the universe itself were listening. When the music ended, tears wet his face. He did not know why. Sheikh Nuri looked at him and said quietly, "Now you have tasted the first drop. But remember, Azim, an ocean lies ahead." That night, Azim lay awake under the stars. He felt no impatience, no questions pressing against his ribs. Only a calm presence lingered, like the memory of a song. And he realized, wisdom was not something to be spoken, but something to be lived. Chapter 5: The Veil of the Self. Months passed, and Azim grew in discipline. He no longer resented the tasks, he worked with steady hands, finding joy in small things, the shine of clean floors, the fragrance of bread baking, the laughter of fellow disciples. But within him, shadows still stirred. He envied the older students who sat closer to the sheikh during gatherings. He bristled when others corrected his mistakes. Pride whispered, "I left my family, my village, all I knew. Surely I deserve more than sweeping floors." Sensing this, Sheikh Nuri called him one morning. "Azim, go to the market. A merchant there requires a servant. Work for him until he releases you." Azim bowed, though resentment burned. Was this not exile within exile? Yet he obeyed. The merchant was wealthy, his shop filled with silks and spices. But his tongue was sharp, his temper cruel. He barked orders, cursed when Azim stumbled, and mocked him before customers. At first, Azim clenched his teeth and bore it. But anger grew like fire within him. One day, when the merchant struck him with a stick for dropping a jar, Azim's hand shot out to grab the stick. Rage thundered in his chest. In that instant, the words of Sheikh Nuri echoed, "Can you serve without pride?" Azim released the stick. He bowed his head and whispered, "Forgive me." The merchant sneered and turned away, thinking he had won. But within Azim, a veil lifted. He saw that his true enemy was not the merchant's cruelty, but his own pride. When weeks later Sheikh Nuri summoned him back, Azim felt lighter. He had tasted humiliation and survived. More than that, he had learned that humility was not weakness, but strength greater than anger. The sheikh smiled when Azim returned. Now you begin to see. The greatest veil between man and the beloved is the self. To tear it is the hardest labor. Azim bowed, his heart humbled. The road stretched long ahead, but he had taken another step. Chapter 6, The Desert Trial. One dawn, Sheikh Nuri called Azim aside. You have worked among men. Now you must work upon yourself. Go into the desert. Take only water and a few dates. Remain 3 days in solitude. Do not return until you have met both your enemy and your friend. Azim obeyed. With only a flask and a pouch, he walked into the barren expanse. By day, the sun scorched him. By night, cold bit his bones. Hunger clawed his belly, thirst cracked his lips. But worse than these was the silence, so vast it seemed to crush him. On the second night, as he shivered beneath the stars, voices rose within him. They were his own, yet sharper, darker. Fool! You left a life of warmth for this emptiness. You chase a dream that will never be yours. Go home. No one will blame you. Azim wept. He felt stripped bare, a child lost in endless sand. He fell to his knees, pressing his forehead into the dust, and cried, Beloved, if you are there, show me. If not, take me now, for I cannot endure. In that moment, the wind stilled. The stars seemed to blaze brighter. A deep silence descended, not heavy, but vast, like an embrace. And within it, Azim felt a presence, closer than breath. He saw no form, heard no word, yet his heart flooded with certainty. You are not alone. You were never alone. Azim collapsed in tears of joy. Hunger and thirst remained, but they no longer tormented him. He had met both his enemy, his own despair, and his friend. When he returned to the lodge, gaunt but radiant, Sheikh Nuri looked into his eyes and said only, Now you begin to walk. Chapter 7, The Dance of Union. Not long after, the disciples gathered for a night of Sama, the ceremony of music, chanting, and whirling. Drums thundered, flutes wept, voices rose in remembrance of the beloved. One by one, disciples began to spin, their arms outstretched, right palm turned upward, left downward, circling like planets around a hidden sun. Azim hesitated, watching. Then, trembling, he stepped into the circle. He began to spin, slowly at first, then faster, until the world blurred. His body became weightless, his breath merged with the rhythm, his mind dissolved in the chant. Suddenly, he felt himself vanish. There was no Azim, no lodge, no disciples, only a vast ocean of light and love, infinite, without beginning or end. He was the wave and the sea, the singer and the song. He tasted union, beyond words. When the ceremony ended, he fell to the floor, sobbing with joy. The disciples lifted him gently, their faces glowing with understanding. Sheikh Nuri said, What you have tasted is but a drop of the ocean. Do not cling to it. The beloved is not found in ecstasy alone, but in the simple acts of love each day. Azim nodded through his tears. He had glimpsed the secret, yet he knew the path stretched on. Chapter 8, The Return of the Ego. But ecstasy is fleeting. In the days that followed, Azim longed to feel the union again. He prayed, fasted, and spun, but the taste of that night did not return. Instead came emptiness, doubt, and despair. Have I been abandoned? He asked the sheikh. Sheikh Nuri shook his head. The ego returns, as it always does. The path is not to chase visions, but to polish the heart until it reflects the beloved in every moment. Not in the desert, not in the dance, but in carrying water, in smiling at a brother, in feeding the hungry. That is where the beloved dwells. Azim bowed, humbled again. He saw that the path was not escape from the world, but deeper presence within it. Chapter 9, The Return Home. Years passed. Azim grew into a man of calm presence, his eyes luminous with quiet joy. One day, Sheikh Nuri called him and said, It is time. Return to your village. Let your presence be the teaching. Azim obeyed. When he entered Kasra, the river sang as it always had, children played in the dust, women spun yarn under fig trees. Nothing had changed, and yet everything had. For Azim saw beauty in each detail, light in every face. His parents wept when they embraced him. "We thought you lost," his mother whispered. "I was lost," Azim replied, "but now I am found." He did not preach. He did not boast of visions or trials. He helped his father at the wheel, played with children, listened to neighbors. Yet those around him felt peace simply in his presence, as though the river within him flowed into all who came near. Chapter 10: The Eternal Journey. Years passed, and Azim became a quiet guide for seekers who found their way to him. He spoke little, preferring silence, a smile, a gesture. His presence itself was a teaching, that the beloved was nearer than breath, hidden in every grain of dust, every beating heart. On the day of his passing, Azim lay beneath the fig tree of his childhood. The river's song reached his ears. His children and students gathered, weeping softly. Azim smiled, his breath shallow, his eyes bright with the same flame that had guided him long ago. With his last whisper he said, "The journey never ends, for the beloved is infinite." And with that, he returned to the one who had called him from the beginning.